Hey, I'm Abbey.
And I'm Shannon.
And we're sisters.
My big sister Abbey has a Master's of Divinity from Earlham School of Religion and has been telling me Bible stories for probably 15 years.
And my little sister Shannon has seen 13 versions of Jesus Christ Superstar and has read parts of the Sermon on the Mount. Together, we're bringing you fun facts, historical context, and Bible stories.
Well, Bible stories according to you.
No, according to you.
According to you!
This is the Bible.
According to my sister.
Listen, Abby, I just got back from my latest away mission. Well, I'm calling them away missions now because I figure if I'm going to a festival in like a little shuttle pod, read truck in a trailer, and then I'm doing the thing and then I'm coming back, and it's like music festivals is a little bit like exploring a strange new world. I'm calling them away missions. I just got back from my latest away mission in Cleveland.
And what did you do in Cleveland?
Oh my gosh, Abby, I finally got to see a band live that I haven't seen in like here, let me rephrase. I got to see a band that I've wanted to see in concert for 3 years and I haven't been able to. So they played at this music festival 1 year and we tried to get the contract for it and it didn't work out. And then the next year they weren't playing at that festival. And then the third year I bought tickets to go see them in concert but couldn't go because I had to do something with Quakers and FCNL. Then I finally found out that they were going to be at this festival and we were getting the contract, and like a year ago I called dibs on this festival at our business. I was like, I'm doing this festival, nothing you can do or say is going to stop me. And so I got to see the X-Ambassadors in concert, and it was so good, Abby. I'm so excited.
I can tell. I think you stealing their playlist.
It doesn't count as stealing if you get it out of a trash bin.
Your life must sound so weird to people
in my
right
defense,
now.
To be fair, our business goes to music festivals and we sort out recycling and compostables from the waste stream to try to divert as much trash as possible. I was digging through trash bins, but it was legal
for your job.
And I was supposed to be doing it, and we may have found the set list, and now I have the set list.
Yes.
It's fun.
And it was worth that 3-year wait.
It was totally worth that 3-year wait. I don't do well in crowds, though. I know how at a concert you're supposed to get into the vibe of all the people around you, but mostly I just, was an introvert and stood there and swayed with my jaw slack, I can't believe I'm here. I was so happy.
Tell. Like a big, goofy grin on your face.
I do have a giant grin on my face. This is the one time I think our podcast should just have a snapshot next to it of me, being beyond giddy. Well, since I'm in such a good mood.
Should I destroy it?
Yeah, I figure you always have something a really good happy story to share with me in the Bible Story Corner, and I feel like that's definitely a trend that's going to continue this week.
Okay, Bible Story Corner. It's not exactly a Bible story.
Oh,
yeah, it hopefully won't be too terrible. I feel like I always say that. In these past few podcasts, I realize I'm throwing all of this historical, and then this is when they were conquered by this, and this is when that was happening, and that's all well and good. But it might actually be helpful if you maybe had the general broad version of what Israel history is like. So when I say something that was during the Babylonian exile, you may have some vague idea of when that was before or after or whatnot. So the Bible story of this week is the Bible/archaeological, very short, simplified version of Israel history intermixed with maybe some Bible history composition stuff.
Abby, that title is mid-2000s emo music title length.
Well, I'll shorten it for the actual thing to put on the podcast title-y thing. But if they gotten this far, they know it's complicated.
It's complicated. Well, okay, that's good, because you're also really good at knowing things about history that I don't know about, so hopefully you'll be able to explain this in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, so besides my religion degree, I also have a minor in history, and I read history for fun.
Nerd.
Yep. So let's start this. Okay.
Where do we even start in this one? A long, long time ago.
In a galaxy really close by here. Yeah. So if we're looking at Bible history, the Bible starts with the creation of the universe. Book of Genesis pretty much is all of a recorded in quotes, history up to the book of Exodus, which is when the Israelites leave Egypt, which is right before the establishment of Israel. So, like, all this kind of like their prehistory, in a sense, is sort of crammed down into 1 or 2 chapters.
So where's like the first point in the Bible where we can say, this event happened and it kind of correlates with a thing we know happened in history, so we can kind of guess that it was this long ago?
Yeah. We know that there were people living in what was called Canaan, which is now the region that's called Israel and Palestine, during like the Bronze Age. So somewhere probably between like 2000 to 1500.
BC?
Yes, BC. No, that's a good question. I should clarify the BC and AD. I'm going to use BC and AD in this podcast because those are terms that have references in Christianity, so it's just, that's what I'm going to be using right now. So archaeology, we can kind of confirm that Israel, in some form, was created between 1300 and 1200 BC.
That really isn't as long ago as I thought it was.
No.
For some reason, I had it in my head that stuff was going on like 10,000 years before Jesus.
Yeah. And we know that because reference to Israel in Egyptian scrolls. So somewhere between this like 100-year period, the Israel, in some form, was established. And we might have talked about this in another podcast, but they've seen archaeological evidence of towns and cities being destroyed over, decades and new establishments being risen. In the Bible, that's kind of the history that's being shown in the book of Joshua. Now, Joshua wasn't written in this time period, but that's the period it's supposed to be taking place in.
All right, so help me out now. So we've gone kind of through Genesis, and then Exodus is sometime a little bit before that 1500 mark that we were talking about. Is Joshua the next book?
Joshua...
There's some rules.
Joshua... Okay, so the book of Exodus is them wandering in the desert, and then there's Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which are all more stories of them wandering in the desert. So the book of Joshua comes next, and is the story of them getting into the land of Canaan and taking it over and creating society.
So the Zelophehad's daughters, was that in Joshua?
I think there was a brief follow-up of their story in Joshua. Most of their story was in Numbers.
Oh, yeah, I do think it was in Numbers. I was just curious, following the timeline. We've got Exodus, and then we have these like books that I mostly think about as like books about rules, and then Joshua happens, and that's when they set up, when Israel becomes a thing.
Yes. And so that would have been, thinking of our podcast, that's would have been when the sun stands still story would have fallen in the book of Joshua.
Oh, yeah, that's where I've heard of Joshua.
Yeah.
Okay. But there were people in that area before they got there.
Yes.
Am I asking a mean question? This is going to get so tangled so fast. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so according to the Bible, yes, there were people living in Canaan before the Israelites got there and took it over. According to archaeology, what they think probably more likely happened was that the poorer people kind of rose up and rebelled against the wealthy people and kind of crushed societies and then rebuilt on top of that. And that's all complicated, and there might have been people who used to live in Egypt who came over, and there were oral stories that kind of connected the Moses story. But there's no archaeological evidence showing a large mass of people moving from Egypt to Israel, and there's no evidence in Egyptian scrolls that there was a group of people who left, and Egyptians wrote down everything, so you would think there would be some mention of a mass exodus of people. There might have been some people who left and created stories. The oral tradition is confusing that way, and so they kind of combined it into the way it's written now.
But there clearly were some kind of oral stories that
had probably have
existed.
Some basis in something that actually happened, but then got embellished like things can happen.
Of course.
So lots of this is going to be, there's the biblical answer and then the historical records that we can actually find.
And obviously, like, we don't have a time machine. We're just going off the best we can figure out at any given time.
Yes. So Israel kind of hanging out, being there for about 200, 300 some years.
America length?
Oh yeah, America length. There are establishments, there are like cities, but no like centralized government. And that would have been the time in the Bible of the judges. Okay. We talked about Samson and the judges. So it was just kind of individual places. Yeah. According to the Bible, it was divided up into 12 areas for the 12 different tribes of Israel. And then around the year, like 1050 to about 1000 BC, a kind of nation or kingdom appeared. Probably around the year 1000, the Jewish temple is built by King Solomon. From what we can tell, there really was a King David and a King Solomon. They have found evidence of that. Biblically, those would have been the books of like Samuel and Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. And then in the year 931 BC, Israel and Judah split. They were kind of like infighting and who was going to rule, and so they ended up just splitting. Israel is in the north, and Judah is in the south. Israel is comprised of 10 of the tribes, and it's comprised of the other 2 tribes. Judah's capital is Jerusalem, where the temple is. And Israel's capital initially was Tirzah, and then it was moved to Samaria.
Is that Samaria as in the Samaritan? The Good Samaritan, one of Jesus' parables.
So it's kind of going along with that idea in 722.
So they've been split for 200 years now? That's a long time. When I think about history, I'm like, oh, we just bumped down the road a little bit, but that's multiple generations. 200 years ago for us, 1810. People were in fluffy skirts then.
Good chunk of time. I mean, in the grand scale, it's nothing, but for human perspective.
200 years later.
Israel is destroyed by the Assyrian Empire, which is one of the Mediterranean empires that kind of rises up. And they're pretty militaristic. So one of the things that they do is they kind of go in to Israel, and they force most of the Israelites out of Israel. Because it's easier to control people if they're not attached to the land. That takes away some of their identity as a group of people. So those people are called the 10 lost tribes of Israel. We don't know really where they went.
Oh, history straight up lost them. This isn't a biblical thing?
Biblically, they are kind of lost as well, but historically we don't know where they ended up. There's this really interesting group somewhere in Africa who claim to be descendants of one of the tribes of Israel, and genetically they are related to the Jewish people. But I haven't looked into that in years. So possibly one group ended up somewhere in Africa. But in general, we don't know where these 10 tribes, at least the last I heard, we don't know where these last 10 tribes are.
What biblically was said about them? Israel disappeared and all 10 of those tribes are just gone.
Yes. Stick with me for a moment, and maybe it'll make sense. A huge chunk of the Israelites were moved out. In the new place, Assyrians brought in a different set of people to populate that land. The Israelites who stayed intermixed with the people who were brought in and created their own version of Judaism, where their temple was on a different mountain, and these people were later called Samaritans because their capital was in Samaria. They felt like they were Jews, or not Jews, Jewish in a sense, I guess, because they worshipped the same God the Jews did. They had that same tradition, but they were separate from the Jews in Judah who didn't get lost in the same way. Right. Generations later, there's kind of this conflict of who has the real Judaism. That's where some of the tensions of that Samaritan story kind of come from.
I didn't even know these
That's
things.
what I thought it would be interesting to talk about. Okay, good.
I'm riveted. This is really cool.
So that's kind of the story of Israel. So I'm going to back up just a little bit. Right around the time that the nations sort of divided and up to the point when Israel gets destroyed is around the time that some of the books of the Bible we're pretty sure were written, or at least parts of them were written. The prophets Hosea, Micah, Amos, Zephaniah, Habakkuk, probably some of the first editions of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings were written in this time. Not in their completed form, but little bits and pieces of them. And also the first part of the book of Isaiah. Isaiah actually has 3 different authors. So prophets were prophesying against people coming in and destroying them. And there were probably notes being written down and oral histories collected from the Joshua and Judges sections.
Was this a symptom of fear of losing their culture or something because of the threat of Assyria?
Probably that, and probably also that they're at this point a nation that's well enough established that they have scribes, they have people who have time to sit down and write these stories as opposed to just orally telling them.
They have hipsters who hang out in coffee shops and write blogs.
And then, the prophets are rising, and so they're writing down what they said, and then they realize, oh, well, they might have been right. So Israel gets destroyed, but Judah's still chugging along until about, in the year 612, the Egyptians conquer them for a short period of time. And the Egyptians kind of get conquered by the Babylonians.
So is Judah just, like, passed from Egypt to Babylon and, like, the...
Yeah, so Egypt conquered them, and so...
Like...
But they kind of still had, like, puppet kings that they were pretending were in charge. Because there were puppet kings, Babylon doesn't control Judah yet. Until about, like, somewhere between, I think it's, like, 597 BC. Judah is finally destroyed by Babylon.
Is this what Jeremiah...
Yes, this is one of the things Jeremiah was talking about. And so this time, like, their temple was destroyed, which is, devastating to them because that's the center of their worship and their culture.
Of course, yeah.
Like the Assyrians, the Babylonians come in and they take a lot of the Jews, or Judeans out of the country and put them in their, move them into Babylon.
In the Assyrian capital.
Before all this, Babylon conquers Assyria.
Babylon conquers Assyria.
So now, right now, Babylon is in charge kind of the Mediterranean. Assyria's fallen.
Yeah.
Now Babylon is in charge. And they also take people out of Judah. They leave some people, but most of the well-to-do people end up in various cities of Babylon. And it is here, it's called the exilic period, when they're in exile, that they really start to form, like, this Jewish identity. Because they don't have a land really anymore, they hold on to their traditions and they start writing down their traditions. And so it's in this period that people like Obadiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel and 2nd Isaiah, more of Hosea and Amos and Micah and Zebaniah are written. Also the prophets are writing down what they just experienced.
Okay.
But they're also starting to write, like, of Deuteronomy, expanding books of Joshua and Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, or 1st and 2nd Kings. They're writing down some of the Psalms. So they're really trying to create their identity and some of their history in this period.
So there's, like, solidifying these things, these books that I think of as, like, the rule books and, like, the this is what happened books. Okay, so they're solidifying these oral histories that we think happened a long time ago, but this is when they're being written. Okay,
and then,
cool.
Kind of actually not long after Judah is conquered by Babylon, Babylon gets conquered by Persia in 538. Persia, his name was Cyrus, conquers Babylon.
Well, does it even matter anymore? Because none of them are in their land anymore.
So yes and no. They weren't in the land. These people from Judah were able to kind of create their identity and really form this identity of a Jewish people, a people who existed even if they weren't in their land, which is what the Assyrians and the Babylonians were trying to pull away from them by pulling them off the land. They were trying to take away their identity, and instead their response was to create an identity that could exist even outside of living in that land.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
So here's the interesting thing.
I mean, it's sad, but it's also really cool.
Cyrus in Persia, he conquers all these places, and he's very different from the Assyrians and the Babylonians. He rules more by making people like him. He sends all what are now kind of like the Jews from Babylon, he sends them back to Israel and Judah, and he pays to have their temple rebuilt. And says, yeah, go on worshiping your gods, go back to your land.
What?
But it gets them to like him, right? So they're less likely to rebel. And so the Jews love him, actually.
But are they now displacing other people that were put there by the Babylonians?
Possibly. But why should they care? It's their land. That sounded terrible. That's from their perspective. Just putting that out there.
I just didn't know if there was a similar culture clash there as there was with the Sumerians.
Yeah, I think their culture clash kind of started more around this time when they came back. And the Samaritans were there and had their own kind of Jewish identity. Yeah. Jews coming back to Judah have their own Jewish identity. And they're saying, well, no, yours is wrong. Because ours is right.
Because now there's like a definitive creation of a culture separate from one another.
So
cool.
The Jews really like Cyrus. Yeah, actually, lots of the references to Messiah in the book of Isaiah and other places in the Bible are referring to King Cyrus because he sends the people home if you're looking at it in historical context. So that's just an interesting side note.
So, and at this point, this is less conjecture because we have some historical record of these things happening.
This is much more right now historical things we can back up. The Babylonian Jews go back to Judah and Israel. They rebuild their temple. They kind of get their religion going back in their land. And this is, for like the next 200 years, this is really when they solidify what is now the Torah, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And they finalize, and Joshua, Judges, Samuel, those books, the laws are really solidified in this time. Their history is really solidified and written down in this. And then there's a whole bunch of other prophets that are writing around now. The last part of Isaiah is written in this period. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, the Chronicles, possibly Ezra or Nehemiah were all written in this period. Things have been solidified. It's much more complicated than what I just said, and we'll probably do a podcast sometime with the creation of the first 5 books because that's really fascinating.
Yeah, for like the history swath we're painting right now.
So they're there for a while, and then about 200 years later, around 332 BC, Alexander the Great comes in and overthrows Persian and therefore Israel, and they are now being ruled by Alexander the Great.
Who is Roman?
Macedonian, which most people associate with Greek, because he was taught by Greek philosophers and really liked the Greek, so Greco-Macedonian. He himself ruled for a very small period of time. When he died, his empire was split up into 4 different territories, I believe, and one of that territories included Israel. And I believe it's pronounced the Seleucid is the name of the family or the area that ruled over Israel at this point for about 200 years.
And when you say Israel at this point, you mean both Israel and Judah.
Yeah. So thank you for that clarification. Yeah. So in 164, a number of kind of fanatical Jews revolt against the rulers because they feel like they're being too harsh and not letting them practice their religion, which is sort of true. And this is the Maccabees, or the story of Hanukkah.
Oh, wait. I know that one because it's in the Rugrats. I know that, like, there was a miracle with the oil and you had enough for one day and it lights for 8, but I'm not sure, like, the context of what was going on around that.
We'll do a podcast on that. It's in Maccabees, which is part of the apocryphal or deuterocanonical Second Temple literature books, the ones that aren't in the Protestant Bibles but are in the Catholic Bibles and the Orthodox Bibles. There are 4 books of Maccabees that were written during this period.
Well, were the Maccabees successful?
Yeah, they were successful, and they ruled for about 100 years, and that was the last time Israel was an independent country until the 20th century.
Okay.
I forgot to mention what books were written during when Alexander the Great conquered them, and then when his descendants, for lack of a better word, were in charge. It's called the Hellenistic period. Yeah. The Book of Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Jonah, and more of the Psalms were written.
Those are more of the artsy pieces.
Greeks are a little bit more artsy, maybe.
So this is just their period where they really get into, like, coffee shop, like, music, and...
That's going on. And the Maccabees are in charge. It's when the Book of Daniel.
And the Lion's Den?
When that book is written, the Maccabees.
Okay.
Then a whole bunch of books that show up in those extra texts that I was talking about. So Judith.
So I don't know anything about Daniel, but I feel like the tone at that point kind of switches back to not like fighting, but like standing up for yourself and like having some kind of strength as opposed to writing poems. This is so cool that like you can kind of follow like the tone of the Bible with like what was going on or when things were written or solidified with what was going on around them at the time.
That's why I thought it would be interesting.
It's like really helping me because before this I was like, there's a bunch of books in the Old Testament, and it made no sense, but now it's like, that was their artsy period, and this is like when they go back to being tough, and this was the part where they needed laws to solidify their culture, or whatever.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense when you think of it in those terms. This kind of closes when the Old or First Testament was written, and when like those Deuterocanonical extra books were written, because in the year 63 BC, they are conquered by Rome.
And here we have Rome.
Yes.
This is where I jump back into my knowledge.
Jesus is born roughly somewhere around the year 0. Probably not right exactly the year 0, but around there. He does his preaching stuff. He's crucified. The Christian church is established and flourishing. Around the decade, the 50s, 50 AD, a lot of Paul's writing. He writes a lot, and those writings get put into the Bible. And those writings include 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Philemon, Philippians, Galatians, Corinthians 1 and 2, Romans, and then, this isn't Paul, but the book of James is also probably written somewhere around there. So the first books about Jesus are written probably 2 decades after he died, and those are just letters to other churches.
So the first things written about him are actually letters.
Yeah.
Okay, can I jump back for a second and ask a question that's probably not relevant, but I'm curious? In Jesus Christ Superstar, there's this song where Simon and the Zealots get up and dance, and they're trying to fight back the Romans, like this thread of the Zealots throughout that Jesus story. Are they like a holdover from the Maccabees, or are they their own separate branch of revolutionaries?
Actually, it's a really good question. That leads me right to my next point I was going to talk about.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if they were holdovers from But there was this whole thread of revolution at this time period. People not liking Rome, wanting to rebel, and they're called the Zealots, and they kind of staged some massive rebellions in the year like 66 through 73 AD.
Okay.
They're pretty much crushed. And in the year 70, as punishment for what they're doing, the Romans come in and they destroyed the temple that was built and paid for by the Persian king all those centuries ago. But so the temple gets destroyed, and the only thing that's left is the Wailing Wall, which still exists today in Jerusalem.
Oh, okay.
By and large, really finishes the Jews' rebellion, saying that there must be some strain that kind of continues on because in 135 AD, the Jews are pretty much expelled from Jerusalem and that area. And that's when you see lots of, like, Jews moving up into, like, the European countries, presumably, but, like, the Jewish diaspora. Yeah.
Rome's done because of the rebellion?
Yeah. It's kind of important to know when the temple is destroyed, because it's also around that time, and even later on, you start to see more and more divisions between the Jewish Christians and the Gentile Christians. I'm not going to talk about it very specifically right here, but you kind of trace, well, this was probably written before the temple was destroyed, this was probably written after the temple was destroyed, depending on what's being written about and what the kind of tensions and feuds are between the two congregations, or the two different kind of branches. Probably around the year 64, the book of Colossians was written. Possibly. There are some books they're really not sure about. They don't think that book was written by Paul, though, even though a lot of people claim it is. There was this tradition in that time of, if you really liked an author, you would kind of pretend to be them and write something in...
Fan fiction!
Yes. They wrote a lot of fan fiction of preachers that they really found influential. And now people knew other people were doing this, so like, oh, so you're speaking from this tradition. It wasn't like, you're plagiarizing.
That's totally legit.
In the year 70, when the temple is destroyed, is probably around the time when the book or Gospel of Mark was written, which was the first gospel, or the earliest gospel that's in the Bible. That's probably also around the time Ephesians might have been written, also probably not by Paul. And then between the years like 80 and 90, the books of Matthew, Luke, Acts, Revelation, and maybe 1 Peter were written. So at this point, we're like 50 years after Jesus died, just kind of keeping that in mind and context. And then the year 90 through like the early 2nd century is when the books John 1 and John 2, Timothy 1 and 2, Titus, Jude, 2 Peter were all probably written, as well as the Gospel of John.
Oh, John was one of the later ones.
Yeah, John was one of the later ones. He has a lot of Gnostic flair to him, which was this branch of Christianity was much more mystical. They didn't really trust the physical world, or much more about the spirit. And you'll see strains of that a lot in John. And that's kind of like the last of the books that are in the Bible. The books of the Bible kind of span hundreds of years, and the books of the New Testament span probably about maybe 100 years.
That's it. That's so surprising. Yeah. Because that is not a long time.
That is not a long time. But the books in the New Testament are, about a person who lived, and the earliest one that's written is, 20 to 30 years after he died. Yeah. Already all this stuff that we've sort of lost about the creation of this new group of people and what they believed and the formation of it in this time.
Okay.
So that is the history kind of Israel and the creation of the Bible, or when books were written, in a sense.
That is so cool.
Good.
Like, I can't even tell you that, like, how much that clarified things for me.
That was the point. I hoped it would. I might actually try to write that down and make it pretty and put it up on our Facebook page so people can look at it if they're more visual.
Yeah, that was sweet. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that.
Cool. But I don't have any, wrap-ups. That was just a whole bunch of really interesting information, I thought. That will maybe make your reading of the Bible and listening to this podcast more understandable.
I guess I don't have anything good to wrap it up with either. Should we just let everybody wrap it up on their own?
Yeah, because it's cool. That's my deep thought. I like context. If you have
That's very
deep thoughts, though, we will be happy to hear them.
Until then.
And Silly Stuff with Shannon.
Silly Stuff with Shannon.
What have you got for me?
Okay, this is going to be a little bit cobbled together. I've wanted to talk about this for months. Have you heard of the Brick Testament?
No. Should I be scared?
No, this does not involve lolcats. It's not. Though it is in a similar vein. I think a wiki walk of lolcat brought me here.
Of course it did.
The Brick Testament is a project by somebody named Abbey Sperling, who started to illustrate stories from the Bible with Legos.
Okay, I'm on board so far.
Cute. I'm going to say they. Sorry, I don't know if LB is a girl's name or a boy's name, or if it matters. Oh, okay, never mind. In 2015, Sperling announced on Facebook that she was an atheist, a transgender woman, and a lesbian. There you go, there's your answer. Only using she pronouns. That's like the perfect answer for me to actually get for this. I love it so much.
Yeah.
What she does is takes these cute little Lego figurines and puts them into cute little landscapes and then takes pictures of them in relation to the Bible.
I like it so far.
They've made a book of it with like little words about the Bible stories in them. And they're pretty cute. You can get to a lot of them on thebricktestament.com. She likes to do some of the less known Bible stories a bit like you do. So you get some random stories like God wants part of a penis cut off and Abraham tries to prevent Holocaust.
Oddly enough, those are some of the ones on my list of stories to talk about.
Isaac born, Ishmael banished. So, and there's little tags underneath of them. So you know, like, this one contains nudity. Nudity of Lego characters.
Yeah.
This one contains sexual content, or violence, or cursing.
You don't need those for Bible stories.
Which is interesting. So I was curious, like, what do you mean cursing? This is the Bible. I think there's some, paraphrasing.
Probably going on, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought it was really cool. I've clicked through some of my favorite stories.
Which are?
Well, there's the adorable Garden of Eden one. So this is bad, and I know, like, you shouldn't make pictures of God, but I really like the ones with God in them. Because there's, like, the creation one, and you know the picture in I think it's the 16th chapter? The 16th chapter?
Sistine Chapel?
Where God and Adam are like, doing the E.T. phone home thing?
Yes.
There's, like, a Lego version of that.
Delightful.
It is delightful. Click on the creation story, and it shows up with, like, God with sometimes a word bubble, and it says, "Let there be light," and then you click the next tab, so it's like an online comic.
Oh, sweet.
And it has, like, and there was light, and God saw that light, and that was good, and so you click again, and there's the next panel, and there's day and night. So it's like an illustrated webcomic with Legos of the Bible, and I think that's a great way to imbibe the Bible.
I love it, yeah.
I'm a pretty big fan. And I don't do a lot of Lego stuff, so I'm amazed at the number of Lego figurines there are and how creative.
Yeah, I mean, we used to like the basic Lego blocks, which were amazing. You don't need more than that, but yeah, nowadays.
At the same time, you know how when you have old, really Christian friends on Facebook who haven't necessarily seen any of the Star Wars films, and they start sharing that picture of Obi-Wan Kenobi telling you to praise Jesus?
Yeah.
I just imagine that there are a lot of, like, secret Jedi things going on in all of these, and I try to look for them. Jacob's wives complete. That dude has a beard. I'm pretty sure that's Obi-Wan Kenobi in a gray wig.
But why not? Be creative.
It makes me happy. And above that, like, I think Jacob and his cousins, I think they're wearing Darth Vader hats, or parts of Darth Vader hats. So, I guess that's like a fun Easter egg.
Yeah.
To find all the Star Wars Legos pieces.
I mean, I don't know, there might be, like, biblical Legos out there, but I'm guessing she probably had to improvise.
And I mean, so, like, the Star Wars stories is pretty basic, good versus evil,
yeah.
And, you know, like, there's a lot of tropes that are very similar, and so I'm sure it works out great. Yeah. Anyway, that was my find for the week, is illustrated Lego Bible.
I love it.
I do too. I'm a fan.
Yay.
So they have, at the end of every episode, we get to ask each other a very important and very serious question.
Yes.
So, Abby, I have a serious question for you.
Okay.
So, Abby, what is the Bible?
Well, after today, I think the Bible is a series of historical events based around the creation and evolution of Lego figures.
That's not how I thought that was going to end.
Hi, this is Big Sister Abby, popping in at the end like normal for a few announcements. First, thank you everyone who is listening. We love doing this podcast and think it's so cool that other people seem to be enjoying hearing it. Second, if you do enjoy listening to it, if you could pop over to iTunes and give a review, that would be fantastic. That's how other people can find us and enjoy us. Similarly, if you want to get a hold of us, we would love to hear from you, and there are a few ways you can do that. First, we're on Facebook at Bible Sisters. You can also email us with our brand new email, which is BibleSistersPodcast@gmail.com. And I think our last announcement this week, because it's a short week, is that our next podcast will be July 4th. Yes, even though it's a holiday, there will be a podcast. And in the meantime, have a fantastic few weeks.